Welcome to the Mind of Business Success podcast. I'm your host, Alicia Cramer. Our guest today is Olly Wood. I'm looking forward to having a conversation about our bodies. So welcome to this show, Oliver.
Thanks so much for being on. I appreciate it.
Let's talk about your business and what you do. Right now, I kind of set it up in this sort of unknown territory. What are we talking about? I've had people coming on and talking about some different types of things, body movement and stuff like that. But you're a little bit more, I would say, kind of like, conventional health, not necessarily purely the, I don't want to say woo-woo because it's not. I'm totally into everything energy related myself.
Mm-hmm.
Client does a session with me, we're getting right into the metaphysics of it. But let's talk a bit about what you guys are doing in your business.
Yeah, of course. And I think it's a progression of some degree, isn't it? Because for me, I started off in a personal training setting that was very conventional and it was nearly military around how we were focusing on exercise. And as my business started to grow in that space, it was very much starting to work with more business owners and corporate leaders and people that were really pushing the lever in multiple areas of their life. And I started to notice that was pretty apparent that the amount of stress and information that they were walking through the door with didn't really make sense to push them really hard in a workout. So over time, that was really a progression. And as you know, in the entrepreneurial space in general, it's really just a process of learning from your customers and understanding what are those key tweaks to what do they want and what do they need and what's ultimately going to get the result long term. They come in wanting to sweat and move and feel like they've had a good workout, but truly what they want is to make sure that they feel good, they can function at a high level, and that they're confident moving into every day. And what's happening if they're just pushing the body harder and harder, they're burning the candle at both ends, and we can see that fatigue really coming through. Now, as a typical personal trainer in that space who's really optimizing exercise and nutrition and all of these things, we can certainly see what areas are coming through from a logical, my certification background space. But as I started to grow the company, and I was very growth minded from the start, knowing the sort of impact and reach that I wanted to have, we built a multi-billion-dollar company by the time I was 26. So what that did in that time period was move from a very exercise, nutrition-based conversation to there's a lot of stress going on here and the body doesn't work the same in this space. I'm not digesting food. I'm waking up with stress. I'm all of these things that happen when we're managing teams and the problems that we have on a day-to-day basis. That really shifted how I thought about my coaching style, because it's no longer a case of pointing the finger and you should be doing this, but they're crushing it in some other area of their life. So it's really a case of aligning these a little bit better and finding a way to fit health back in their day that actually feels like something they want to do rather than a chore that they continue to forget to do, right? And one of the things that became very apparent for me initially was how much I held stress physically, and noticing how much that was coming through in digestive issues and how it's coming through in drive and motivation and poor sleep quality and all of these systemic issues that impact how your body functions. And we start to get to a point where we try and manage emotions in a way that and I'm sure you see this a lot, is we just become baseline. We have no lows, but we also have no highs. And we just become in the middle somewhere. And I think that really starts to get in the way of not just mental health, but very much physical as well. So a lot of this becomes an awareness and hopefully a conversation of tuning back in with getting your body running like a Ferrari again, rather than feeling like it's, slogging along like a car that hasn't been serviced for 20 years. And that's really, I think, the space that we're in, is taking the time to refine that machine a little bit, because when you finally get above that survival mode and you're in a position where you are doing great things in business, you realize there's a lot more to it than the new tactic of getting you leads, right? There's a lot more to that mindset, that personal energy. How you show up in that day comes right back down to how you're looking after yourself. And that's really the area that we're working with now, is getting away from the reactive, I need to fix this, and how am I going to show better tomorrow?
When people are in that reactionary state, there's that survival mechanism. It's like you're just driving. Sometimes it seems like on empty, and it can be really difficult for people when they're in that headspace and they're already physically depleted to have this sort of wherewithal, like the consciousness to even say, I need to take my foot off of the accelerator and recharge.
Mm.
So when you're working with someone brand new, they're coming into your world, are they oftentimes at the place where they've already sort of hit that physical rock bottom, so to speak, and now they're like, okay, can't go anywhere but up from here? Or are you catching some people who are recognizing it's not supposed to be this way? I should feel better. I need to be able to have the physical stamina to be at my A game.
Mm. I think the first part is I can definitely resonate with that narrow-minded focus, because from an athletic background, I did the same thing in quite a few different sports. It was with rowing for 5 or 6 years. It was with bodybuilding shows for another 7 8 years, and then the same on that business stage, right? Getting to that $1 million or whatever the focus was, and we end up realizing that nothing matters at the end of the day until we place meaning behind it, right? And this becomes that conversation everyone sort of gets to when if they finally hit that goal, they're like, what's next? Or, why that took up so much time, and it becomes so all consuming. So that focus, I think, is something that, again, just looking past the goal and asking, okay, what happens then? Like, what's next? And realizing that you're working so hard and putting everything towards a plastic trophy. That's totally fine if that's the goal. But how are we taking the time to really create some meaning around how does this tie into every day? And what are the other components that we're choosing to say no to in order to do that? Now, if you're happy to make that sacrifice, then awesome, let's go all in. But taking the time to be aware of those other pillars of life that you are letting crumble through that process can't be an everyday, all of the time thing. And typically there needs to be a couple shifts happening there. Looking at business in the same athletic mindset, many of us wake up, we're straight onto emails, we go into the business day, we're still doing emails at lunch, and we're shoveling food down as we're still looking at a screen. We never actually stop. And if we were trying to be as effective as possible on the athletics field, then we would have taken some time to look at downtime and how we can show up in a better way. So it's really just a reactive space of looking a bit deeper of where we're going, or extending the goalpost a little bit beyond 2 weeks from now. And I think is an important part of trying to have a conversation that's a bit more wholesome and isn't about a 2 week shred for the holiday, but it's how I can still feel good in 10, 20 years, because the strategies I put in today are something that I'm happy to do every day.
I would be willing to bet, and I am not a betting person, but I would be willing to bet that the majority, if not 100%, pretty damn close to it, of people, if you were to ask them ultimately what they really truly want more than anything else, it's not just the money, it's not just the success, it does include physical well-being and feeling comfortable in their body and having a life, a long, healthy life, as well as obviously quality relationships and love and all of those things. When, when I'm working with someone, when somebody new comes into my world and I'm getting a feel for where they're getting in their own way, a lot of times they're coming in and they're so hyper focused on their goal, and their issue is that they're literally making themselves miserable because they want their goal so bad. They're trying so hard. They're so focused on not having their goal that they're actually creating all of these additional obstacles on their path. And when I ask someone what they really, really, really want, it takes a little bit of digging to get them out of this surface level focus that they've been so stuck in for so long, to actually even recognize that there are these other really true, authentic desires sort of underneath all of that. And it's not that you can't or shouldn't want the success, but what good is the success if you've literally driven yourself into the ground and now, you're a shell of who you could be, or you feel like shit because you're not taking care of yourself. This is kind of, maybe a wake-up call, I think, for some people listening who are going through that, because a lot of people put off the other priorities until, like, oh, I'll take care of myself when I've achieved the goal, when I have the money, when I have the success. I've got to keep grinding, keep hustling, keep pushing through this because this is so awful what I'm feeling right now. I've got to get the end result. I've got to get the goal so I can feel better. And then I'll clean up the issues in my relationship, or then I'll fix the problems that I'm having in my body. And they're just sort of dealing with all the crap that's going on physically, mentally, emotionally.
Mm-hmm.
From your perspective, I'd imagine that when you're working with a client, it's not just physical stuff, right? They've got probably the mental, emotional stuff that needs to be addressed as well. When you're working with someone, do you help with any of that, or is it just more focused on the physical?
No, 100%. That's an area of focus that, you can't change physically unless you change mentally. And you start to uncover some of these roadblocks coming through, because knowing what to eat was never the problem, right? It's all of the other components that we really need to address. And a lot of this is around that being able to protect what we call bumpers, that morning and afternoon routine, or sometime to protect space for you. It's that emotional or stress-based eating, or shifts that you do in that space. How does your body hold that? Your body keeps a score of what's happening emotionally and mentally. So looking at that and taking the time to uncover how we can isolate a certain focus really comes back down to what you touched on really well, which is just the quality of the questions you're asking, and what time horizon are you looking over. Because if you're only ever looking at 4-week time horizons, then you live in a very immediate sort of day-to-day reactive space. But if you zoom out, as you mentioned, and start to look at this, the way we love to look at this through workshops we do is, let's write down what people are saying about you, and what mark you want to leave on the world at your 80th birthday. So we're really zooming out 20, 30, 40 years from now to look at what are the shifts that we need to take to make sure we're in alignment with some of those values, with how we actually want to show up on a day-to-day basis. Because if we don't have that space of, we got the business success, but every other area started to crumble. We don't have the relationships. We don't have the health. We're miserable. That's not a particularly nice place to live. And I think there's components of this that we can dive much deeper into. But really, as you mentioned, the quality of the questions you're asking, and what is ultimately the roadblock, known and unknown, that's getting in the way. Because it's very really going to be the fact that you think you need to eat less and eat and train more. It's going to be all of the other components of nourishing that body, looking after yourself, how moving allows you to show up better in your day. And those alignments of making sure that that's important through the things you care about. Because if it is truly business that matters, I don't want to change that, right? It's a priority on there. And I think every PT says, your exercise needs to be a priority, but that just misses the whole thing, which is, well, how can we align this to make sure that by exercising, you show up in the way that you really care about on a day-to-day basis? And what are those components of business success that are starting to be impacted by you not looking after yourself, and how can we align those better? So it's very much just starting from a space of what do they truly care about, and how can we take the time to get closer to the goal they really have.
I love that. It's such a smart way of working with an individual. And you're right, there are so many people who are doing it ass backwards. You can't ask somebody to overwrite their values, their priorities with what you're saying should be their priority, because it's not sustainable. And I think that a lot of people can get behind, well, if I still am able to lock into my core value, my heart's desires, and I can see how this fits nicely into that, it supports that. In fact, it actually helps make that even better. Well, now you're using the mind the right way. You're using the faculties of the mind to support you in achieving your goal instead of working against yourself. And a lot of people are doing that, not just with their physical goals, but with time management and with, family things and all the other stuff, like trying to compartmentalize so many different goals without there being synergy and harmony. And that is exhausting. And we start to feel fragmented, and it's just not sustainable. So what you're
Mhm.
saying here is brilliant. It's just you're helping people to align with what their goals ultimately are. And a big part of that goal is to feel good. And you're
Mhm.
dealing with not just physical fitness, but the whole system, right? Like you mentioned digestion and things like that, like some of the
Yeah.
issues that people frequently are dealing with.
Totally, and that's our entire model. Is we build it through what we call the R4 model, and we can walk through that if you like. But the integration is really that physical, psychological, and digestive health, and how do they really integrate them together? Because we could be looking at food sensitivities all day, but if we're noticing that we're stressed or inhaling food, well, that could be the very reason we've got those digestive issues in the first front. So taking the time to look at how many integrations there are between those three, we look at digestive issues, into hormonal, into things like thyroid conditions, and understanding how all three of those together are so integrated. If we're looking at it in isolation, you're probably missing the picture entirely.
So anyone listening who is feeling sluggish, this might be your sign. Now, I want to shift gears a little bit because I want an opportunity to speak a little bit more directly to you as the business owner, because I know that
Mm-hmm.
you've gone through your own personal journey and the ups and the downs, and you've created some pretty incredible successes and wins for yourself with your business. And one of the questions, the only canned interview question that I ever ask my guests, is if you'll share with us one mindset obstacle that you've personally had to overcome in order to get to where you are today.
Yeah, as you can imagine, there'd be a ton, but one that really comes to mind for me is I had a rather big motorbike crash back in 2020. Yeah. And it was right after we'd really built a platform, built a business. Things were going really well. They were humming along really nicely. I was in pretty good physical condition. I'd just done 5 or 6 different bodybuilding shows, and there was really like an alignment that I was feeling really good with, right? Like I felt like health and business were on the same level. And we were racing around a motorbike track, and I had entire brake failure at 200 Ks, which is like 130, 140 miles an hour. Which didn't end up too well. So clearly I went straight to the barrier, flew 30 meters away from the actual track and landed in a position that, surprisingly, I didn't break a spine or pelvis, but I tore a whole lot of things off my shoulder, dislocated the thing, and overall banged myself up quite bad. What I thought was initially a dislocation was actually basically all the muscles of that shoulder torn off. So it became what is still now a bit of a recovery process of 2.5 years later. But the biggest thing I really learned from that, and it was a really, really big asset to how I coach clients now, is, and this ties in so well to the business environment, and I really didn't understand it properly until I went through this, which is we're so tied into this all or nothing attitude. If we can't do it 100%, it ends up being zero more often. And when people look at that through a diet, they follow it perfectly for 2 weeks until the new project comes through or the kid gets sick or whatever. And then it falls off the face of the earth the next 6 months before we try again. So taking the time to look at what are those shifts I can take to really be happy with a 5% improvement? How can I make sure that I'm not in this all or nothing mindset, because it ends up being 0% or nothing more often. So it's taking the time to look at these incremental improvements, and really it's shifting how we look at that model as a whole, to building a new baseline and taking the time to find something I'm happy to do and then build to the new level. So it allows us to see those incremental improvements, because sometimes when we are going through a massive push at work, we're going through a big project, the goal is not to drop another 5 kilos. It might simply be to not go backwards, right? And that's a perfect enough goal to balance out these pillars we have in our life. And I think that's really the key here, is taking the time to look at building those 1% improvements. And for me, going back to the 2 kilo dumbbells and struggling to lift the thing, right? It became a process that I actually was able to enjoy, because I could think about the incremental improvement from lifting the drink bottle last week and struggling with that, and building through that process of, this has happened, but rather than focusing on what was good, doing well 6 months ago, I'm now having a conversation of the 6-month progression I have ahead of me to work on where I'm at right now through my lens of how I can progress. And that just allowed us to really shift our focus of individual paths, those obstacles that come through, and that ability to just look at running your own journey and taking the time to look at, like, those things will come through. Let's look at the 1% rather than trying to hit perfect every day. And that for us has now become a What's your baseline? What's your non-negotiable? What are you going to do even if everything else hits a fan, right? And taking the time to look at, I'm going to nail my morning walk regardless. But if I miss a couple of days of the workouts, it's totally okay. I still protected that morning walk or whatever it is. So it's just finding those non-negotiables, that baseline that everything else can build on top. I think the big reason that people struggle, and I certainly struggled for a long time in the health or even in the business space, is we look at playing this movie in our head of what the perfect day looks like, and we continue to fall short. So why not we build up the baseline, the floor, rather than continuing to shoot for the ceiling? It's fantastic if we get there, but we need to make sure that we are winning more often rather than always failing. And I think that just allows for much more consistency and ultimately more momentum long term.
That is so, so good. We see it all the time in people who are setting weight loss goals for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't just gain that 50 pounds overnight, but they expect for some reason that they should lose it overnight. And I see this with my clients, and I don't work as often with clients on weight loss as I did when I had my general hypnotherapy practice, but a lot of my clients, it is one of their goals. And because I'm not working with people just on business, it's every area of your life. Because if you're not happy in your life, if you're not fulfilled, if you don't feel good, what's it worth, right? So when I'm working with a client and they have this struggle, many cases for years, and this is so parallel to what we experience as business owners also. So many business owners, it's the same phenomenon. Like, I've been flipping trying to achieve this goal for years. I've been, one step forward, one step back, two steps forward, one step back. And it becomes emotionally exhausting. And we develop apathetic habits of thought, and we start to doubt our ability to ever achieve our goal. But the dream doesn't go away. Just like the person who wants to lose the weight, it's like on some level, it's possible. On some level, it would make you feel so much better, not only about yourself and your confidence, but just because you're congruent with yourself. And so many people feel incongruent with their body. They feel incongruent with where they're at in their business because they know in their heart that they desire something so much better, but they're bumping up against that. I've got this idea of what I want it to be like. And I always use this analogy. It's like you're standing at the bottom of the staircase and you're looking at the top of the staircase. And you immediately feel hopeless and overwhelmed because it's like, there's no way I can take this step all the way to the top of the staircase. And it is that ability, like what you just stated so perfectly, just that little incremental gain. It's taking the next logical step. And then from there, you can take the next logical step. And that's how you get from the bottom of the staircase up to the top of the staircase. Because even though it looks like some people, especially in business, who look like they're knocking it out of the park, it looks like it was an overnight success, that's rarely ever the case. They're maybe running up the staircase, but it's still a logical sequence. And so many people who have been struggling for so long, they're still like the deer in the headlights, not going anywhere when they need to, stop the paralysis and actually start moving.
Yeah, and we've all been through this. I think anyone that's created some level of business success there's the rocky cut scene that's lasted 5 or 6 years before they start taking the staircase, right? And I think that's where the overnight success, the 20 kilos lost today sort of promises come through, is not the understanding and the depth of really those roots growing down before we can go up. And I think that's an important part. We'll always have that conversation with members of understanding. Again, this is a personal conversation and we want to be really, really careful, only because I've noticed it a lot in the health spaces. I want to make sure that we're achieving their goal, not my goal, because otherwise we tend to really maneuver that. But we do want to be really, really clear of, so where do you sit on the spectrum of results for health? Because our goal is to get your health back on your side. As you mentioned, really bring this awareness to your body, both through mentally, are we in tune with it? But two, what are those things we can remove, what we call the 7 system spoilers, areas that we are ultimately disrupting so many functions in our body. to get things actually functioning well for your body to make those changes and to actually feel like you're on your side? Or would you like to do this in 2 to 4 weeks and force your body in a position to be in a work position 6 weeks from now? Because we're probably not your guy. So taking those shifts and just being very transparent with front loading health, getting your body back on your side so that you can operate on a better system every day rather than a short term, let's lose the weight. It becomes a good conversation and hopefully a wholesome conversation of what they truly want rather than what they've been told they want.
So true. All right. So let's talk a little bit about how our listeners can connect with you, because this is something that a lot of people need and want. And you're doing things in a very, very holistic way, which I am fully 100% behind, because I know that there are so many temptations for quick fixes, pills, and or just buy this new machine, this is the one that is going to blast all of your fat and now you can live happily ever after. But it's not sustainable, and it's not retraining the body, and it's not retraining the mind. So let's talk about how our listeners can learn more about what you guys are doing and how to connect with you.
Thanks so much. I think the biggest one you've just said, which is there's plenty of people that need this. It truly comes back down to want. And if it comes to, hopefully what we've had a good conversation about today is this awareness of alignment between the true goal. Like, how much are you really leaving on the table by leaving health till next year, or until that project is finished, or when it really gets bad? Taking the time to align these earlier on and realize how much better you'll show up, and knowing the immense amount of promotions or business growth people have had inside of our program because of how much they've sorted out their mental and physical health, it becomes the blockage that nobody's looking at, right? And if you want to double your business, you've got to first make sure you've got the capacity to handle that doubling. And that's really what we're missing, is we're talking about all these productivity hacks, but we don't have the capacity in order to be productive in the first place. And this is the capacity that you're building, right? That's the 60, 70% you're leaving on the table. And hopefully, if you're in that position of trying to find those tools to add to your tool belt in your business success and hopefully aligning to your bigger goal, that really is where this conversation comes back to. Like, how can we make sure that health is a conversation in that trajectory you're looking at? So if you want to dive deeper into our space, that's really the approach we take. But as we talked about, it's taking the time to get your body back on your side. If you're in the spot where you feel your body is not responding, you're doing some exercise here, you're doing some nutrition changes, you're trying to make those tweaks, and you feel that you're on a health kick. Many people say, I'm doing something for my health, right? But how would you do that with your business and say, I'm dabbling in a couple of Facebook ads, but I haven't really sorted it out yet? There's so many layers of understanding and depth there in health and business. And if we bring the same standard to both, now we're going to create a whole lot more value behind the two. So for us, we dive into what we call the R4 method, which is our 4-phase approach. And the goal really is to reset where you're at right now, taking the time to really simplify that focus point before diving into our repair portion. That's where we dive into things like your blood work, really understand what sort of damage is being done deeper down, so we can really look at this from a full picture of from biological markers, not just symptoms. And then we can dive deeper into sealing and healing this gut, looking at those 7 system spoilers, understanding how do we get your body back on your side. It's not just what you eat, it's what you absorb. And that's a really key component of what we look at in phase 3 before making sure we look at finally that restore portion, which is, as today's amazing conversation has been about, is not just the short 2-week goal, but how do we make sure this is part of every day and make it as simple as brushing your teeth. And that's really how we approach it, to make sure that from a business sense, this is tying in, from a relationship sense, this is tying in, and from a personal growth standpoint, you really feel that this is in line. So if you want to learn more about us, bodyreset.online is our main website, diving into a little bit more about us. I think for this audience and this conversation we're having, I think the resource that would be beneficial, regardless of whether you want to work with us personally, would be our 5 dials training. I think it's a really good way of breaking down or zooming out, as we talked about today, to look at the areas that you're taking into account to look at health. Because many of the presentations I've done, nutrition we're looking at, training we're looking at, but how are we taking the time to optimize recovery? What are we doing to make sure we actually add joy into our day? Or are we just going through and doing the same things and not really enjoying it anymore? If it lights us up, it puts a smile on our face, we front load that energy for the week. We take the time to show up better. And that's the whole reason we're here. So that would be a really great training to start with, and hopefully that helps your listeners too.
Awesome. This has been a great conversation and an important one, because business is not just about strategy and tactic. It's why are you doing it? It's for the quality of life. And our health is such an important part of our quality of life. So thank you so much, Oliver, for being with us today.
No problem at all. This is really fun. And thank you so much for the questions. They were really wholesome and hopefully I helped your audience.
Well, I think it was a great conversation. I hope our listeners agree. I want to thank our listeners. And if you haven't already subscribed, make sure you do so. And we will see you in the next episode.